We were on our weekly call with our inner circle members, just a regular call, nothing special on the agenda, nothing that said today is going to be a big moment. And one of our members shared that she had just crossed into multi seven figures. And if you know what it takes to build that inside of a salon business, the years of dedication, the decisions, the hard conversations, the showing up when it would have been so much easier not to. That is not a small thing. That is everything. And she said it almost like it was a footnote, like she was already moving past it to the next thing on her list. And I stopped her and said, "Wait, can you just stay here for a second? Do you understand what you just did?"
I remember watching that, and I mean, she got so quiet, right? And then I remember her saying something. She said, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about since." She said, "I know it's big, but I just feel like I have so far to go." She almost missed it, standing inside one of the biggest wins of her entire career, and she almost missed it completely. Not because she wasn't grateful, not because she didn't work for it, but because the distance between where she was and where she thought she should be felt so much louder than the wind that was in front of her. What struck me in that moment was how many of the women on that call went quiet too, because they recognized it. They had felt it, and most of them were feeling it right then.
Yeah. And, if you've ever done that, if you've ever crossed a finish line and immediately looked up at the next one before you even caught your breath, this episode is for you because that feeling has a name. And once you understand it, you can stop letting it steal the moments you actually earned.
We took a lot on this show about the work, the strategy, the numbers, the team, the systems, and we're going to keep doing all of that. But today we're going to dive underneath it to the thing that no strategy can touch on its own. Because if you've ever built something real and still felt like it wasn't enough, this is the conversation you didn't know you needed. And we are going to get into some things today that don't get talked about enough in this industry. Not because they're complicated, excuse me, but because they require a kind of honesty that feels risky when you're used to being the one who has it together. What's going on? My voice is so good. It's like, here, deliver it, Jen. It's so good, deliver it. So if you're driving to the salon right now, good. You've got us for for the next little while. And so let's get into it.
Yeah, let's actually start by naming what this feeling actually is because most salon owners who experience it spend a lot of energy trying to explain it away. They tell themselves they're tired, that they need a vacation, that, if they can just get through this next season, things will settle and they'll finally be able to enjoy what they've built. So they take the vacation and it's wonderful, and about 4 days in, the feeling starts creeping back because it was never about being tired. It was never about needing a break. The feeling is coming from somewhere else entirely. And until you name where, you cannot do anything about it. Here's what we've seen working with salon owners at every level. The feeling of being behind, even when nothing about your actual situation says behind. It's almost never about your business. It's about the gap between who you are right now and who you sense you are supposed to be becoming. And that gap is real. But here's what nobody tells you about it. The gap is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that you are growing. It means part of you already knows there is a next level, and the current version of you hasn't caught up to it yet.
Yeah. And the woman on our call that day wasn't failing. Like she
Mm.
wasn't ungrateful. Like she was standing at the edge of a new identity and she didn't have the language for it yet.
Mm.
So her mind handed her the only word it could find. Behind, 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 right? And the saddest part is how quietly it happens.
Mhm.
She didn't make a big announcement about it. She said it like it was just the background noise she had learned to live in. And, we hear that from so many of the women that we work with, this low, constant hum of, not enough not enough running underneath everything, no matter how much they build, no matter how many milestones they cross, the hum is still there. And here's what I want you to understand about that hum: it is not a character flaw, it is not a weakness. It is what happens when your results have outpaced your belief in yourself. And the gap between those two things is the most important thing you will ever close in your business. Not the revenue gap, and not the team gap, this one. And here's the trap that catches almost every high achieving salon owner at some point. And I want you to really hear this because, it's the thing that keeps so many incredible women on a treadmill, and they don't even know how they're on it. You believe the feeling will go away when you hit the next milestone, when you cross the six figures, when you open the second location, and when you finally build the team that doesn't need you behind the chair every single day. So you put your head down and you build toward it and you get there. And for a little while, maybe a week, maybe two, it is quiet. There is pride, there is relief, there is that exhale that you've been waiting for.
Mhm.
And then the bar moves. And without even meaning to, you, you are behind again. That is not a motivational problem. That is not ingratitude. That is what happens when you are trying to fill an internal need with an external result.
Mhm.
The hunger is real, but achievement is not the food it needs. I think about this because we've sat with salon owners who've crossed every finish line they've ever set for themselves and felt within days like they were right back at the beginning, because the identity underneath the achievement hadn't shifted. And an old identity is very good at exactly one thing. It's very good at keeping you exactly where it is comfortable, no matter what the numbers say.
Yes, because your identity, the story you carry about who you are and what you're allowed to have will always catch up to your achievements and quietly renegotiate the terms. It will say, okay, you did that, but look how far you still have to go. And that voice sounds like drive, it sounds like ambition. It sounds productive, but it's not moving you forward. It's keeping you in a permanent state of almost there, no matter how much you accumulate. And the most disorienting part of this is that from the outside, nobody can see it. The women we are describing look like they have it together. They're the ones other salon owners look up to. They show up fully. They lead their teams. They hit their numbers, really any goal that they set, but on the inside, they are running a quiet war between what they have built and what they believe they deserve. And that war is exhausting in a way that's really hard to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it, which is why we say, and we mean this as practically as anything we will ever tell you, the most important work you will ever do in your business is not in your business. It's in the story you are telling about yourself. So let's get specific about what is actually happening. When a salon owner has genuinely built something real and still cannot let herself feel it, it almost always comes down to this: she has grown her business faster then she has grown her belief in herself. The results are there, but the identity has not caught up yet. And here's what that looks like from the inside. So tell me if this sounds familiar. She second guesses decisions she has made successfully 100 times. She asks for more opinions than she actually needs. She holds back on raising her prices, even though she knows in her gut that she should. She apologizes for things that don't require an apology. She has every receipt of a successful business owner and the internal experience of someone who still isn't fully sure she belongs there. And almost all of the advice that exists for salon owners assumes that belief is already in place. It assumes that she has already answered the question of whether she deserves what she's building. The courses, the coaches, the marketing strategies, the systems, they all start from that assumption. And for so many of the women that we work with, the question is still open, not because they haven't worked hard enough, but because nobody ever told them that building the belief was part of the work too.
I think about this. The thing that makes this so hard to solve on your own is that it is completely invisible from the outside. The woman on our call, nobody looking at her would have seen it. She was accomplished and warm and generous with her knowledge. And she had built something that most people, will never get to build in this industry. But on the inside, she was measuring herself against a version of success that kept moving every time she got close to it. That is an exhausting race to run. Whew. And it never ends on its own, because the finish line is not a number. It is a decision. And the word to decide comes from the root word to cut. So it's a decision. You cut off anything else. And the business can only grow as far as the owner believes she deserves to take it. That is not a soft idea, you guys. That is the most practical thing that we know. And it is the idea, it is the thing that almost never gets talked about out loud because it feels too vulnerable, like too much like admitting something that might make people think you don't have it all figured out. But the salon owners who, actually they break through this, who hit the milestones and genuinely, feel it on the other side, they did this work too. And they built the belief while they were building the business.
Yeah. So here's the reframe. It's not a new strategy, not another framework, just a different way of seeing what's actually happening. What if the feeling of being behind is not a signal that something is wrong with you? What if it's a signal that something is ready in you? What if that low hum of not enough is not your failure talking? It's your next level knocking, not taunting you, not shaming you, just knocking, waiting for you to open the door. Because here's what we know about the salon owners who really break through, not just hit a number, but genuinely feel different on the other side of it. They all share one thing. At some point, they stopped trying to earn their way into a new identity, and they started deciding their way there instead. They decided their way there instead. So before the proof showed up, before the milestone, before anyone else could see it, they made a decision, like Jen said, cut everything else off, about who they were. And then they acted from that place. When we stopped that woman on our call and reflected back to her what was actually true, you are not behind, you are becoming, something shifted. Not because of a new strategy, because she finally had the right mirror. And sometimes that is the only thing standing between a salon owner and everything that she has been working toward.
And you were dropping notes in there. I don't even know if you realized you said this, but like what I heard you is like, you said, what if that low hum of not enough is not your failure talking, it's your next level knocking? I was like, okay, that was good. I love that. That was so good. I want to be clear about what deciding actually means. Like we meant we said earlier, mentioned earlier, because I know it can sound like fake it till you make it. And it
Mhm.
is not that at all. Pretending is a performance. It's exhausting and fragile, and it collapses the moment you are alone with your thoughts. Deciding is something quieter and so much more powerful than that. It is a private shift in how you see yourself. It changes what you say yes to. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what feels normal. It just requires you to choose on purpose, with intention, the version of yourself who you are going to operate from today. And then again tomorrow and the day after that. And this is how identity actually shifts, not in one dramatic moment, in a series of quiet decisions that actually compound over time, just like the business you've been building all along.
Yeah, we want to leave you with one question today, not a to do list, not a homework assignment, just one question. And we don't want you to answer it right now on the way to the salon or whatever you're doing. We want you to take it with you and sit with it tonight when things are quiet and the day is done and there's no one to be strong for. Here it is. If you woke up tomorrow and genuinely believed you were already the salon owner you were trying to become, what would you do differently? Not what would you add, not what strategy would you finally implement. What would you stop hesitating on? What decision have you been waiting to feel ready for? What would you give yourself permission to do that you have been holding that just feels just out of your own reach? Because that version of you, the one who has everything, that you are currently building toward, she is not waiting to feel confident before she leads. She is not waiting for everything to be perfect before she raises the standard. She decided she was ready. And then she acted from that place. That's the only difference between where you are and where you're going.
Yeah, because the gap between where you are and where you are becoming is not a problem to solve. It's truly a space to step into.
Mhm.
And the only thing that carries you across is a decision. Not a plan, not a program, not another course, a decision. You are not behind. You are at the edge of something really good. And we think you already know that, because if you didn't, you would have turned this off a long time ago.
Yes. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. If this episode found the right person at the right time, and we have a feeling it did, share it. Send it to the salon owner in your life who needs to hear this. Leave us a review, and we will see you next week.
All right. See you then.